Was that because I'd be sleeping over at his house tonight? I was a little worried about that myself. When at long last the final bell rang, I got out of my seat slowly, thinking for once that it didn't matter if I stayed a little longer. After all, I'd probably be driving home with Alexander anyway. Sarah was waiting for me at the door to the classroom and made me skip with her all the way to the flashy red car. I knew it made both Bob and Alexander smile as they watched us, and it was enough to bring a smile to my face as well. Looking forward to tonight? I know I am, the girl enthused happily as she squashed into the back seat with me. The Clinton house was huge. It was more like a mansion, really, built in a somewhat Victorian style. It was pretty, I decided as I followed the siblings into their home. Everything inside was decorated in warm colors, all of it tastefully flowing into each other to make it a pleasant, warm home. I instantly felt at ease. The hallway looked messy with all the shoes and coats scattered about around the coat and shoe rack. There was a wide silver dish on a dark wooden cabinet against the other wall, and Alexander carelessly tossed his keys in it before disappearing deeper into the house. Bob cast Sarah one look, smiled at me, and then said, "If you need anything, I'll be in my room." Then he too darted away, up the stairs and out of sight so quickly that I barely saw it. "Come, I'll show you around," Sarah hurriedly said as we took off our shoes and coats. Then she pulled me into the first room on the left, a wide dining room connected to a large, homey-looking kitchen. On the other side of the entrance was a large living room with big, comfy couches and an expensive-looking TV set. How could they afford all this? Alexander was the only one who worked, and it seemed like they didn't have any parents. I had heard Sarah say Alexander was their legal guardian. Maybe they had had a big inheritance or something? Because a teacher salary sure wasn't enough to be able to afford this. After I'd seen all of the ground floor, she took me up the grand stairs and pointed at the doors we passed. "That's Bob's room, bathroom, my room. Down the hall is Alexander's room. There's another bathroom, that's the study, and those two doors are both guest rooms." After that dazzling explanation that I was sure to forget, she tugged me into her own room and set about getting the both of us ready for that party. When at long last she was finally done with me, I stared at myself in the floor-length mirror in her room. My auburn hair had been perfectly styled, falling around my shoulders and face in wide curls, dark makeup around my eyes to make them look smoky and sexy, all of it finished off with a little lip gloss. Just enough to make them look moist, almost as if I'd just been kissing. I was wearing a simple black dress she'd lent me. It was way shorter than anything I chose to wear myself, but somehow she'd forced me into it. I still wasn't sure how she'd managed that. It was snug too, showing a little cleavage. The heels she'd somehow shown up with felt strange on my feet. I never wore heels, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to wear them all evening, let alone walk on them properly. No matter how uncomfortable I felt in the clothes, it was all worth it as I followed Sarah down the stairs. Both Alexander and Bob were right there in the hall. I wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or if Sarah had told them to wait there for us so they could see us. Bob's eyes raked over my body appreciatively, his mohawk bobbing as he nodded his head. "You look very nice, Brittany," he said warmly. "And so do you, Sarah." Alexander just stared at me, his eyes following the lines of my body until finally resting on my face, his stormy eyes wide. I saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed once, twice. Still, his mouth fell open a third time. Did I really look that pretty? I couldn't imagine him doing that on purpose. He looked a bit like a goldfish. A very handsome goldfish, though. At long last, he snapped out of it. "You're going to that party looking like that?" Oh, that didn't sound very friendly. In fact, he sounded rather angry. "Alex?" Sarah snapped at him, and he took a step back. "Oh, don't take me wrong, you both look stunning." At both his eyes lingered on me, though. "But you know how teenage boys are. They'll be all over you." That's kind of the point, brother," Sarah replied as she pulled me with her out the door. I couldn't help but squeak a little nervously. "It is?" I was looking over my shoulder just so I could see Alexander a little longer. He was clenching his fists at his sides, a frown on his forehead as he stared after us. Was he really worried guys would be all over us? Suddenly I was worried about that too. I didn't need that. Didn't want it. Although maybe it was a good way to find a guy my own age to crush on. I couldn't really call what I was feeling already for Alexander a crush, though. In the car with Sarah, I took a few deep breaths to relax myself. "Sarah?" "Sarah." "Yes, hon?" my bubbly friend replied. "We're not really going there to hook up with guys, are we? We're just gonna dance and have fun?" I hurried to ask her, just to reassure myself. Sarah laughed. "Of course. I just said that because I know it would annoy him. That's all." I drew in a relieved breath. Phew. That was one thing less to worry about. Now, all I really had to worry about was probably seeing Jennifer at that party. She would definitely rat me out to Stephanie if I did something there that would piss her off. When we reached the house, the party was held and everything was already in full swing. Loud music was pouring out through the brightly lit windows. There were a few people on the front lawn, obviously drunk. The front door was open, so Sarah let us in herself, then confidently pulled me with her through the mass of dancing bodies in the living room. In the kitchen, she handed me a glass and filled it with water from the faucet. Never accept a drink you didn't see being made. Always make sure, know exactly what's in it, okay? Loads of pervs around here, Sarah advised me. After we both drank some water, she pulled me back to the room full of dancing people. We joined the mass. Dancing with Sarah was really funny. We did it for at least an hour straight. Then we only stopped to get something to drink again. I spotted Jennifer on one of the couches, surrounded by guys hanging from her every word. When I saw her again, she was pressed against a wall with her tongue down some brown-haired boy's throat. Lucky guy. The third time I saw her, she was dancing too, smack in between two guys, grinding them as if no one was watching at all. Dirty, dirty girl. Sarah saw me looking and sympathetically said, "You don't need to see that. Go get some fresh air, hun. You look a little flushed." I nodded in thanks and followed up on her advice, making my way outside into the backyard. There was a pool there and loads of drunk people swimming in it, some not even completely dressed anymore. I stared at it, a little repulsed. "Yeah, some people have no morals," said a guy suddenly from beside me. A little startled, I jumped away from him. He had somehow gotten very close without me noticing. Although, with all the noise, it was still hard hearing what he said. He smiled and held up his hands to show me they were empty. "Didn't mean to scare you. See, I'm unarmed." Then he winked mischievously at me. "I'm Fort, by the way." "I'm Brittany," I replied with a smile of my own. This guy seemed nice enough. He looked a little familiar too. Probably attended Westtown High, just like me. "I know," he said with another wink. "Everyone is talking about you and your sister Brittany." "Oh, I didn't know that." "Why were they talking about me?" "They're talking about you because of the people you hang out with." "I guess," answered Fort. Apparently I had spoken that thought out loud. "And also because you're really pretty. You know, you might not have noticed, Brittany, but all the guys in school want you. Just as much as they want your sister." I scoffed. "Yeah, right. They don't want me, Fort." "Well, two as a B. But it's nice of you to say that. If they all wanted me so bad, then why didn't they even spare me a glance? Or why didn't even a single one of them come up to me to talk?" They all followed Jennifer around like meek little lambs. Fort laughed a charming laugh. He was handsome, with brown, short, spiky hair and sparkling dark eyes. I'm sure he would have been exactly the right type for Jennifer. I didn't feel impressed after all. He looked nothing like Alexander. Still, his company was nice, so when he asked if I wanted to go somewhere more quiet, away from all the music, I didn't hesitate to say yes. "Always so hard to talk with the music, you know," Fort was saying. "If we go on like this any longer, I won't have any voice left for tomorrow." I nodded my agreement. He took me back inside the house and led me past the dance floor to the hall, then up the stairs. I didn't see Sarah anywhere, but I saw Jennifer looking at me with a strange look on her face. Upstairs, we passed a few doors. Fort opened each one a crack and then closed them again. At last, he found an empty room, apparently, and pulled me inside. The music wasn't as loud as it was in the garden or downstairs, so we didn't have to yell to talk. He sat me down on the edge of a bed and plopped down next to me, stretching out on his back. "You're pretty cool, Brittany. You should be the popular one, not your sister." I shook my head. "Don't make fun of me." But I smiled at him anyway. He was smiling so warmly at me now, and his laughter was very infecting. We lapsed into an easy conversation again. It was starting to get late. It seemed like I had been talking to Fort for quite a while now. He was openly flirting with me and didn't seem ashamed of it at all. It was both a little disconcerting and flattering at the same time. "I think I should go and find Sarah. She's probably looking for me now," I said as I realized I had totally ditched my friend just to talk to this guy. It felt a bit like I was doing something wrong. In fact, I didn't understand why I had followed him up here in the first place. Sure, his company was nice, but it didn't feel right. Everyone knew going up here usually meant something along the lines of sex. That was probably why he checked all those rooms so carefully, making sure I couldn't see. The bed we were sitting on seemed 10 times smaller than before, and I hurriedly scrambled to my feet. "Yeah, I think I ought to go find her." "Already? Just when things are getting interesting," Fort said with another devious smile. He grabbed hold of my hand and pulled me back down with him. I was a lot closer to him now than before, and suddenly I realized that I could smell alcohol on him. Fort. I really should go. Sarah is looking for me. I hoped that was true, and that at any minute now, she'd burst through the door to get me away from there. The boy had lost all his charm from before. It really seemed as if he transformed from easygoing and relaxed to angry. A strange snarl passed his lips, and then suddenly he was on top of me, pushing me down roughly with his body weight and his hands. His lips attached themselves to mine forcefully, and I tried desperately to push him away. Moving my head sideways helped a little. His lips were on my cheek now. It didn't stop him from trailing kissed over the exposed skin all the way to my ear where he bit down on my earlobe. Let go. Stop it. I yelled, but my hands were trapped uselessly underneath his heavy chest. He was forcing my legs apart with his knees. Somehow my black dress had already ridden up to expose my panties and part of my stomach. Why was he so bloody heavy? Why couldn't I fight him? I had never felt so helpless and so defenseless, and above all so stupid in my entire life. One hand had roughly taken hold of my breast, and he was squeezing hard enough that I moaned in pain. "Stop it," I whimpered as desperate tears started forcing their way out from beneath my lashes. "I know you want me, baby. You like this, don't you?" Fort was saying. "No, I don't." "Let go of me, you asshole." I screamed as I hit him as hard as I could with my free hand on his head and neck and shoulder. Anywhere I could reach him. He grunted in pain when my fist struck his eye and then raised himself so he could get a better grip on both my hands. It meant my left leg suddenly had more space to move, and I prayed, "Please let this work. Please." Drawing back my leg, I brought up my knee as hard as I could, rejoicing when Fort screamed out in pain. He doubled over, grabbing for his crotch, moaning and cursing my name, but I was already pulling down my dress and running out the door. I hoped he couldn't walk for days. I was still crying as I dashed down the stairs, straight through the living with its crowded mass of people. Then finally, I was out the door and pounding down the street as fast as I could. I never, ever wanted to go back there, and I certainly never wanted to see that fort ever again. I'd only gone as far as a few streets when I stumbled and twisted my ankle, all due to those stupid heels. I didn't bother getting up, but just brought my knees to my chest, hugging them tightly as I cried. How could I have been so stupid? I walked right into that. What was wrong with me? Shivering, I clutched my arms more tightly around my body. I could still feel his hands on me, his lips, feel him touching me. Oh God, he'd just gone and stolen my first kiss. I had let some idiot steal my very first kiss. The thought made me cry even harder. Stupid, 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 stupid. This was all my own fault. Shh. It's not your fault, never your fault. You're safe now, it's okay. I promise you're safe, I'll protect you always. "Nobody is going to harm you," a soothing voice with a British accent whispered into my ear. I would recognize that voice out of a million, and I didn't push him away when he wrapped strong, warm arms around me. Easily, he lifted me off the ground, pressing my face into the crook of his neck tightly. Tears were still pouring from my eyes, soaking his shirt, but he didn't let go when I tried pushing away. He was still whispering an endless stream of soothing words, all delivered in that enchanting accent. I had the feeling of motion, but with my face pressed against his neck, I couldn't see anything. Was he taking me somewhere? Focusing on that stream of words for a moment, I realized he was telling me he was taking me home. It was interspersed between all the "you're safe, I'll protect yous." Warmth hit my body and I heard a door close. Then I was shifted in his arms as he sat down, holding me in his lap. Only then did he let go enough so that I could pull my face away from the crook of his neck. I almost didn't. It felt nice to hide there. "Bob? Go check on Sarah. I didn't have time for that," Alexander said out loud suddenly. The loud noise made me flinch, and it resulted into him spewing another stream of calming comments. He was stroking my back now, tracing patterns again. My body was still in a panic state, shivering, my fists clutching tightly onto his shirt, my heart beating rapidly in my throat, tears pouring down my cheeks. I tried to focus on his embrace and his calming voice, but it was hard. The memories of what had just happened kept resurfacing. On top of that, my mind kept blaming myself for being so stupid and following that boy upstairs in the first place. I should have noticed what his intentions were. My sight was blurry and I kept my eyes downcast. I was too afraid to see the accusation in Alexander's eyes. He must think I was stupid too, especially because Sarah had made it seem like we both wanted attention. "Shh, Britt. It's okay. I got you, promise," Alexander was saying when at long last I had calmed down enough to stop my sobbing. At the moment, I was still clutching his shirt tightly as I cried into it, but he could tell I'd calmed down somewhat because he'd stopped whispering and was instead just pressing me tightly to him. It felt a little as if he was afraid to let go. I had the strangest feeling that I wasn't alone in my head, my thoughts slowly filling with warmer, more pleasant things. Like the white beach I used to spend all my days in the summer at. Whatever presence filled my mind, it touched everything with gentle caresses, making me feel loved and safe above all else. Briefly, I wondered if it was my mother, but at that thought, Alexander chuckled softly. It made his chest vibrate against my cheek, and without my consent, a soft moan escaped my lips. The feeling of his chest moving so warmly against me had sent hot tingles through my body. At the sound, Alexander froze underneath me, and then I heard a groan, soft, almost muted, as if he tried to keep it in. "Britt," his voice whispered silkily after a while, "will you tell me what happened?" His voice was very gentle, but it wasn't hard to hear the underlying anger, barely contained. Curled up against him, warm and feeling safe in his arms, I had almost fallen asleep, comforted by that warm caress on my mind. I stiffened, worried the anger in his voice was meant for me. "Shh, it's all right. You don't have to tell me," he said, rubbing my back soothingly. My mind suddenly felt swollen with all the warmth and love. Love? I was sure that was it, although I had no clue if this was coming from Alexander or if I was just imagining things. It wouldn't surprise me if I was, after all that had happened tonight. "He touched me," I croaked, my voice hoarse from crying so much in such a short time. "Alexander made the strangest sound I'd ever heard a human make," he growled. "Like a real animal would? A predator?" I shivered and couldn't stop myself from looking up at his face. He looked angry, his eyes so dark they almost appeared black. That had to be a trick of the light. It wasn't possible for eyes to have that color. But his touch was very soft when he ran his fingertips over my cheek, down to my throat. He let them rest on the pulse there. I swallowed and found myself saying, "He stole my first kiss." My first kiss. Shivering, I added, "He stole everything." I kept saying no. I kept pushing and hitting him. Another growl erupted from Alexander's throat, loud enough to make my ears ring. Definitely not a sound a human should be able to make. It sounded like a lion roaring, yet I wasn't scared. His hand on my waist was almost bruisingly tight, but the other one ran across my shoulders and back, checking for injuries. His nostrils flared as if he was smelling something, and it wasn't something he liked. "Everything?" he forced out, his mouth barely opening, his voice distorted. The British accent was gone, replaced by something that sounded a lot more Irish instead. "Impossible! I would have smelled the—" He trailed off, looking shocked to have spoken those words out loud. Smelled what? He was confusing the hell out of me. "Continue à gramo croyez," he said when the silence stretched. I was simply staring at him. Did I imagine it, or had his eyes really turned back to a much lighter shade? The same stormy gray I'd seen that first day we met. I feel so stupid. He seemed nice, and I wanted to get my mind off things. I shivered when I could only just refrain myself from saying you instead of things. It was becoming harder every minute not to pay attention to the fact that I was sitting in his lap, being held by his arms. We just talked, for at least an hour. I didn't think any of it when he asked me to go somewhere quiet. I trailed off again, looking away from his face as shame colored my cheeks. I was such an idiot. Alexander was still tense, but again I felt a caress across my mind. It told me not to doubt myself. I had been naive, not stupid. "Sarah should have warned you. She knew you'd never been to such a party before," Alexander said out loud, adding on to the caress in my head. "Sarah shouldn't have to babysit me." "We're both 18, I said defensively. I suddenly felt the urge to let him know clearly that I was an adult too. When he chuckled, his chest vibrated against me. I had to bite down hard on my tongue to keep from moaning again. Flushing with embarrassment, I had bit hard enough for the coppery taste of blood to spread through my mouth. I wanted to leave. He just jumped on me. He stole my first kiss. It was supposed to be special, not like that. The words tumbled from my mouth to hide what I was feeling. His vile taste on my lips and his hands on my body as I remembered were enough to forget all about my embarrassment. Alexander ran a hand over my back, all the way up to clasp around the back of my neck. "You'll receive plenty of special kisses in the future, Britt, that I promise." All my fear, disgust, self-loathing, and anger towards Fort drained away at those words. It felt as if he meant to be the one to give them to me too. His accent as he spoke still sounded more Irish than British, and briefly, I wondered where he really came from. "You don't get it," I exclaimed then. "I'm a girl. We have all these romantic images about how that first kiss should be. I bet you don't even remember, but I will, for the rest of my life." Shocked at my own outburst, I stared at him, searching for a sign that told me I hadn't offended him. His eyes had darkened again to an almost unnatural black, but he seemed otherwise relaxed now. I realized he wasn't staring at my eyes, but at my lips. Horrified, I realized my mouth was still hanging open. Before I could close it though, that hand on my neck pulled me towards him as he leaned in, our mouths connecting. His kiss was very soft and gentle, completely opposite to my experience with Fort. Everything seemed to be on fire, my toes curling in those damned heels, electricity sizzling my nerves. It was the best feeling ever. It felt like coming home, like being loved, and most of all, it felt like finally being whole. When we finally pulled apart, I was panting. His breathing seemed to be all right, but his eyes were still dark, and now they were glazed over. With a gentle hand, he carefully smoothed my hair away from my face. "There, now I stole your second kiss," he whispered rather huskily. Only then did it sink in that I'd been kissing my teacher, and that sitting in his lap was highly inappropriate, no matter how young and handsome he was. Kissing him had been the most amazing thing I'd ever done, and it was wrong. How could something that felt so right be wrong? Still, I scrambled to my feet and smoothed down my dress hurriedly. He followed my every move with hungry eyes. I should, shower and go to bed." My own voice sounded anything but steady. "Of course," was all Alexander said as he smoothly flowed to his feet. Without another word, he took my hand and pulled me with him towards the stairs, guiding me to the bathroom upstairs. At the door to it, he left me with a few clean towels. Just as I was about to enter, so I could at long last calm my rapid beating heart, he called out, "How did you get away?" "I kicked him where the sun don't shine," I said, offering him a hesitant smile. Was he hurt that I ran away from him after his kiss? Despite the fact that I'd obviously kissed him back. The look on his face could only be described as proud, though. Was he seriously proud I kicked that guy? I undressed hurriedly and got into the shower without looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't need to see the bruises to know they were there. I turned the water to scalding hot, needing to feel it burn my skin just the slightest bit so I could erase the sensory memories of my ordeal with Fort. I stood under the hot water spray for at least an hour, but I still didn't feel like myself when I stepped onto the cold tile floor. I felt dirty even though I'd never been this clean. I felt vulnerable, naked, so I quickly dried off and slipped into my PJs, loose sweats, and a too large shirt. Even dressed, I still felt vulnerable and lonely, but I didn't dare go find Alexander to keep me company. Instead, I went to the guest room Sarah had prepared for me earlier that day. The room was large and white, but the curtains were heavy. The large bed in the middle looked like a giant ice cube. I curled up in the middle of it and piled the blankets high up around me. It was cold and I felt exhausted from all the stress. Pretty soon, I was shaking again. I felt like crying because I was still angry at myself for falling into Fort's trap so blindly. Before the tears could fall, I felt that presence in my mind again. It seemed as if I could almost hear a strange lullaby in my head. The melody soft and beautiful. The words, if there were any, were in a strange language I couldn't understand. It had that Irish sound to it, though. I fell asleep thinking of soft, drizzling rain, rugged yet beautiful green nature, and Alexander's kiss. All of it was saturated with a warm feeling of love and complete acceptance. Faintly in the background, I heard the voices of Sarah and Alexander talking. Alexander sounded very angry. The touch on my mind was suddenly gone, but I was so relaxed that I fell asleep very shortly after that. I woke up panting as if someone had been holding me underwater while I struggled to get air into my lungs. Shaking all over, I remembered only too clearly what my nightmare had been about. Fort. Only he wasn't really Fort, because somehow halfway through reliving my memory of the night, he changed into a snarling wolf, bigger and more menacing than any wolf I'd ever seen. He'd been drooling all over me as he opened his mouth with rows of gleaming white sharp teeth, ready to tear my throat out. Then out of nowhere, such as only happened in dreams, Alexander had appeared flinging the wolf off me, attacking it with his bare hands. I wanted to scream and pull Alexander away from the snapping jaws, but someone was holding me back. Alexander was growling while the wolf snarled, and soon all I could see was matted brown fur. Alexander buried underneath the huge creature, blood pooling around the wrestling forms. Alexander's blood. I shook my head to dispel the dream, but fear was racing through my veins. I was both scared for Alexander's life, unreasonable as it was, and terrified of Fort for a whole new reason. I couldn't shake the thought that he really was a wolf. A wolf in sheep's clothes. The large, dark room had shadows looming everywhere, and I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the blankets that had tangled around me away and nearly fell out off bed in my hurry to get to the door. I'll just go to Sarah. I thought, she'll understand. Even though a small part of me thought, wouldn't you rather go to Alexander instead? I nearly screamed at the shadow in the hall, but it was only Bob. I didn't mean to scare you, he mumbled apologetically, his blue eyes gleaming silver in the sparse light. It reminded me of the eyes of a cat. My heart was hammering in my chest, and it seemed he was looking straight at it instead of my face. That's the room you are looking for, Bob said, one long arm stretching out gracefully to point at a door a little ways down. Thank you, I mumbled, already rushing towards it. His strange behavior was only spurring my panic on. I didn't really have a clear idea of what to do when I reached Sarah, but I was sure she would calm me down. I stumbled through the door ungracefully, closing it behind me with a click that sounded louder in the silence next to my heavy breathing. This room was even darker then, the guest room, but I could faintly make out the bed. I hurried towards it. I was lucky there was nothing in my path. Are you awake? I asked softly, trying desperately to calm my breathing and heartbeat. Sarah didn't need to know how shaken I was. Of course I glamo growy. What's wrong? The suave voice that spoke from the dark was distinctly male, and I knew from the furious blush and the tingling spreading over my body that it was Alexander. Oh, Bob sent me to the wrong room. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, making it hard for me to speak. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house. It had me nearly jumping out of my skin. Nightmare, I squeaked, the shock helping me speak. I was chanting in my head, please don't send me away. I don't want to be alone. Please. A warm hand gently grabbed mine and pulled me closer to the bed. Rustling told me he pulled back the blanket. Call me here then. He quickly pulled me into the bed with him, although memories of my ordeal and the dream had me rushing into his arms as soon as the words left his mouth, my haste causing me to fall down rather than lay down. The blanket was deliciously warm, and so was his body as I buried my face in his chest. He wrapped his arms around me tightly so that there was hardly any space between us. Even through my panic, I could feel he wasn't wearing a shirt. Don't worry, I'll protect you. I'd never send you away, he whispered softly in my ear, his warm breath blowing across my face. Go to sleep. Agramo choi. I resisted the silly urge to run my hands over his skin to check if he wasn't hurt. It was just a dream. There was no such thing as Fort changing into a wolf and killing Alexander. A feather-light touch on my mind, just the strong sense of love this time, steadied my heartbeat. Alexander softly started humming, a lullaby, the melody familiar, although I recognized no words. The steady movement of his chest going up and down as he breathed right underneath my head was very comforting. The panic of mere moments before seemed but a faint memory, and soon I was asleep again.